All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes debut YA author Gary Lonesborough, who will discuss the book David Levithan says, Awed Me with the Power of Its Storytelling. Today we are discussing Ready When You Are. Lonesborough will be in conversation with acclaimed YA author Vitor Martins, and here are both of their beautiful books. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Gary and Vitor, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. Left Bank Books offers in-store shopping, curbside pickup, and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. Today we are in a ton of different time zones and literally all across the world. So we are happy to be able to mail things to literally anywhere. And we are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoyed this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for your friends at left-bank.com. Gary was so kind to send signed book plates all the way from Australia that we have available on our shelves now. Your support for our store helps us keep bringing you incredible authors like our authors today. So thank you so much for your support. I'm Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. We produce hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so you can type your questions as a comment. And you can do that at any point in time throughout the course of the event. If you want to let us know where you are joining us from, I'm super curious. You can type that in the comments now. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on YouTube and Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. And now, about today's book, Ready When You Are. A remarkable YA love story between two Aboriginal boys. One who doesn't want to accept he's gay, and the boy who comes to live in his house, who makes him realize who he is. It's a hot summer, and life's going all right for Jackson and his family on the Mish. It's almost Christmas, school's out, and he's hanging with his mates, teasing the visiting tourists, avoiding the racist boys in town. Just like every year, Jackson's auntie and annoying little cousins visit from the city, but this time a mysterious boy with a troubled past comes with them. As their friendship evolves, Jackson must confront the changing shapes of his relationships and his friends, family, and community, and he must face his darkest secret, a secret he thought he'd locked away for good. David Levithan, the incredible David Levithan, says, "It is honestly a book I've been searching for over my whole career as an editor, as well as all my years as a queer reader. I'm not ashamed to say that it made me cry repeatedly and awed me with the power of its storytelling." And now, about today's authors. I'll hold up each book. Gary Lonesborough is a UN man who grew up on the far south coast of NSW as part of a large and proud Aboriginal family. Growing up a massive Kylie Minogue and North Queensland Cowboys fan, Gary was always writing as a child and continued his creative journey when he moved to Sydney to study at film school. Gary has experience working in Aboriginal health, the disability sector, including experience working in the youth justice system, and the film industry. He was Bega Valley Shire Council Young Citizen of the Year, won the Patrick White Young Indigenous Writers Award, and has received a Copyright Agency First Nations Fellowship. Ready When You Are, published in Australia as The Boy from the Mish, is Gary's debut YA novel. And today, Gary will be in conversation with Vitor Martins. Vitor received his degree in journalism but works as an illustrator. He published his first YA novel, Quinze Dias, in June 2017 with Globo Alt in Brazil, which was published here the whole time in the US in fall 2020, and is also beautifully on our shelves right next to each other in our YA section, which we are so happy to have. And now, I am so thrilled, and I would love to have you help me welcome to the screen our incredible authors for today, Gary Lonesborough and Vitor Martins for Left Bank Books. If you'd please help me by giving them a wonderful round of applause. Hello.
Hello, Shane. Hello, Gary.
Hi.
Well, I'm so excited to hear this conversation. I have a lot of questions of my own that I will save for the end as well. And I'm going to turn this over to you so that we can hear about this incredibly beautiful book.
Thank you, Shane. Hi, Gary. It's really a pleasure to meet you here.
Hi, Vitor.
So I'm very excited to be here in this book event for Ready When You Are. It was a great reading for me. Just like David Levithan, I cried reading it so many times. And it's a beautifully reading book. So I was very excited and honored when I was asked to be here conversating with you tonight. So I prepared a few questions, and as Shane said, we will have some questions from the audience, and I hope it's gonna be a very fun night. Night for me, morning for you, evening for Shane. So we have a lot of time zones right here right now, but let's begin. So the first question I have, it came to me because we both have very similar publishing journeys, because my book was also released here in my country first and later in the US. So it's a very odd experience. And I want to know from you, how are you feeling now that your book is available for a whole new group of readers? And how was this process for you of revisiting this story after a while, to the republishing in another country, and what you expect US readers will take from Ready When You Are?
Yeah, thanks, Vitor. Yeah, I'm very excited to be talking with you as well. I guess it was really strange to be launching the book all over again. So the release happened in Australia in February last year.
Yeah.
So it's been a whole year since then, and yeah, it just feels strange to be talking about it again, and releasing it again. That being said, I am very excited to see how our American readers, respond to the book and the story and the characters. I think for American readers, what I hope they would take away from it is the story is very much an Indigenous story. It's a First Nations story. So I'm not really sure. The amount of literature that's available for American readers that focus on the Indigenous American stories and characters, and especially in fiction. So I'm just hoping that, I'm sure that a lot of these readers will have been exposed to queer YA love stories before, but I really hope that Ready When You Are is a refreshing and very different experience for them, that gives them another angle to look at this kind of story from, and yeah, ultimately I just want them to feel like they've really fallen in love with these characters, and have related to the story and have had fun while reading it, and have felt emotional while reading it. I think the best responses I get is when someone says that they could really relate to Jackson, or really relate to Thomas, or really relate to that young love, that gay young love story, that's at the heart of the book. And yeah, I just hope that the readers take away that joy that you get from falling in love for the first time from reading this book.
Yeah, that was one of the main characteristics of this book for me, because it's so emotional and so beautiful, and the way you portrayed queer love and first love and falling in love in the summer, it's just so beautiful. And I'm sure American readers will love it from beginning to end. So, on your author's note, you say that one of the reasons you wrote this book was to finally see an Aboriginal queer teen accepting who they are. So, I want to know, how did you came up with Jackson and Thomas's story? Who came up in your head first? So, this question is more for you to tell us a little bit of the early writing process of Ready When You Are.
Sure. I think the original idea for the story, it came from a short film script I wrote when I was at film school. And I think I wrote that around the time that I came out for the first time, and I was finally starting to live my life authentically. And it was kind of the draft of that short film script was kind of like a therapy for myself, just to as kind of like a love letter to my teen years of being closeted, and centered around this secret relationship between these two Aboriginal boys. So I wrote that script. I didn't end up doing anything with it. Years later, I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli, and then it just sort of clicked in my head that I hadn't read a queer YA love story that featured an Aboriginal couple, or especially two gay Aboriginal teenage boys. So yeah, I just decided. I think as a writer, I was always kind of looking for that story that I would that story that I would write. I'd probably written like 50 begun stories that I'd begun without actually finishing, and yeah, once I had that realization, it was just like I could see the story in a series of scenes from beginning to end, and I just started writing. I think Thomas was my first character that came to mind. So he was my original protagonist. He was a very different character to what he is now, and he was actually So it was very much that holiday romance kind of thing where you travel away to this strange place and fall in love with this mysterious guy who was Jackson. And then eventually you have to leave, and it was a very cliched kind of story. But yeah, that was my first in with the story was a few drafts of Thomas's point of view, which changed and evolved, and it really wasn't until I started exploring the story from Jackson's point of view that it became so much, like the story just became so much richer, and all these other layers came into it, and it became Ready When You Are, which is out today. It's been an interesting journey for a few years, just getting that voice right, I think.
I really enjoy getting to know these early process secrets, because as a reader, I am always curious about how the stories that I read end up developing. And as a writer, I also have so many stories that begun in a different way, and I have to fought them inside my head because things just keep changing. So you mentioned that you began writing this story as a film script, and I just, out of curiosity, how film school helped you become an author? How much of film school have you put on in your writing career?
I guess it's definitely changed the way I visualize stories, or the way I approached writing. So I think, approaching the writing after film school, I'm thinking very visually. I'm using more of my five senses. I'm thinking more of the little things that happen outside of the character in the middle of the frame. I guess it just changed the whole approach I had to storytelling. So when I was getting the story of Ready When You Are, it was just these series of scenes in my head. Like Jackson and Thomas at the river, and hearing the rushing water, and just like a freeze frame image of them at the river is in my head. And like the old race course, the night with the New Year's Eve night with all the rides and the alcohol and the music. Yeah, it's definitely changed how I visualize the stories before I start writing them. And yeah, I think it's worked out for me. It gives me a different. I guess it's just more tools for the belt, really.
Yeah. And I think it translates so well in your writing because there are so many important scenes in your book that they are so cinematic and they are so visual, and that's so rich for me as a reader. I really enjoy that. And a scene in particular that was to me very deep and beautiful to read is when Jackson takes Thomas to the men's group. It's a scene about passing culture and knowledge forward from the oldest ones to the youngest ones. And I believe you can see this kind of scene from so many different aspects. And for me, it was beautiful too. The balance of the respect we must have for those who came before us and all the freshness of a new generation that are able to change things a little bit. So I want to know, how do you relate with that team and who were your role models growing up?
Good question. I guess in Aboriginal culture, like our elders are like they're our lighthouses. So they're the ones who guide us, and the ones we look for like as role models, or they're the ones we look up to. What I'm trying to say. So yeah, so the respect for the elders, because they hold the culture, they hold all the knowledge. That's very important to us as Aboriginal people, and what I really wanted to put across and to explore in the story was the meaning of culture for Aboriginal teenagers, and the culture is very much a healing thing for a lot of Aboriginal teenagers and Aboriginal people in general. As a teenager, I was so not interested in learning about culture or practicing. I was more interested in underage drinking and playing football. Yeah, it wasn't really until my early 20s that I really started to understand and connect with my culture, and even though I had elders and my parents and family members influencing my life all the way into my 20s, it wasn't really that important to me until I was in my 20s, and becoming an adult and realizing that life is bigger than what it was when I was a teenager. So yeah, I guess obviously my parents were very much my role models. My grandparents, my grandmother was went to uni in her late 50s, university in her late 50s, and became a lawyer. And yeah, I have so many great family members, older family members who I can look up to, and now as an Aboriginal person, I try to now that I'm in a position to be able to say, I came from here and now I'm here. I really like being that the person that those kids can look up to, or if they're looking for a role model, they can look at me. I'm very much happy to do that now. I'm very connected to my culture now, and yeah. So the important thing in that story was to show the culture for what it was. I know that Aboriginal culture isn't treated very authentically in a lot of Australian books, film, TV. So as an Aboriginal person, I just wanted to be authentic and really show that healing, the benefit of healing that you get from culture as a teenager who is maybe struggling or still trying to find their way in the world. so yeah, the culture was very important for Jackson in the story, because it's the place where he goes to heal himself when he's struggling, or he has this internal journey, that his internal wrestle that he's having with himself. So there's the men's group, and practicing the culture is a place where he can heal himself and learn to grow. And yeah, I really just wanted to show that supportive environment of those groups, which I've been lucky enough to be a part of throughout my life. And yeah, just show that Jackson's culture is important to him, and that he is trying to connect more so than he already is.
Yeah, that's
Sorry, that was a
beautiful
very
chat.
long-winded answer.
No, but it was beautiful. And for me, you said two things that stand out for me in your book is its authenticity and all the healing process that it's actually about. And the healing come from so many things in the story. So talking about this, I wanna point out that Ready When You Are touches in a lot of hard topics such as racism and out of home teens and teenage drinking and the struggle to accept yourself in an environment where you doesn't feel safe to came out as queer. So it can be really challenging writing about those things. And sometimes as writers, I feel like we have to access a lot of our own painful memories to create an authentic story. So I want to know from you, how do you balance all that inside your mind and your heart while you were writing such a powerful story?
Yeah, the balance was really hard to, particularly like just for the story, it was really hard to get that balance right. At the heart of the story, I wanted to tell a love story, and so that was the heart. I knew I wanted to touch on other things, but not passing comments or a paragraph worth of information on something. So really, the way I just had to go back to the roots, and the truth is that all of those things are very much part of the experience of growing up Aboriginal in Australia. So racism is very much just a part of life. The colonial structures and systems that are in place that we have to grow up around and try to live through and come out the other side are very much a part of life. Like the out-of-home care system that you mentioned, system, and the education system even. They're all just things that we have to navigate as Aboriginal teenagers. So really, it was just about portraying an authentic picture of an Aboriginal teenage boy growing up in Australia, and those were the things I just had to explore because they're very much a part of life. But at the same time, I just wanted to. There was a love story at its heart, so that was always the most important thing for me, was getting that love story right. Yeah, I know it just took a lot of work it was a lot of tedious drafting and editing to get that balance right of everything else, because it's just part of Jackson's life and it's part of his experience, and it's important to touch on those things. And I'm very passionate about all those issues, and so I wanted to show them, and I wanted to explore them in ways that didn't impact or detract from the love story, but at the same time just really just wanting to paint an authentic picture of a teenage boy growing up Aboriginal in Australia. I guess talking to the way I there are definitely times in the writing when I get really emotional, or I found that I was touching something I was hitting a nerve that I didn't really know I was able to hit before. There's a scene where it's New Year's Eve and Jackson gets into a fight after someone calls him a racist term. So I really wanted to make that moment impactful. So it was really just sitting down and thinking about how exactly that made that made me feel when I've been called that, and really trying to articulate that feeling that particularly the non-Indigenous reader can see it and get an understanding of how that feels to be called that, those words. So yeah, I spent a lot of time talking to friends and just venting and processing things. I've done a lot of training and processing trauma and all that stuff, so I already have those sort of tools in my hand. But yeah, talking to people and talking through those issues is sort of how I got through that in a positive way.
Yeah, and the balance you mentioned, it's so good in this book, because even though you are dealing with a lot of hard topics, as I said, it's such a romantic book, and it's such a fun book because all of the family scenes with all those cousins, it's so funny, it's so messy and chaotic, and I had so much fun. So now it's time to talk about queer love and how much of a beautiful love story Ready When You Are is, because when I was reading, I felt so contemplated, because two of my favorite romantic tropes are slow burn and forced proximity. And you gave me everything I ever wanted. So Jackson and Thomas are such a complicated and cute couple. So I want to know, what are your favorite aspects and dynamics to write the relationship?
Well, yeah, you would know a thing or two about this. I very much like the resistance to the relationship at the beginning. The ends at the fact that you have to deal with this person. I really love that as a starting point for a relationship. Just in fiction, not in my real life. in the story, I really love that. Like the almost the dislike at the beginning. I really love writing those early scenes. Jackson being annoyed that Thomas has to sleep in his room because he can't in the night, like things like. I also very much love the making things go wrong in the relationship. So well, without giving away spoilers, making there's like a string of things that go wrong. So brought it back into the book, and I had so much joy just stuffing things up. I found it really fun, actually. I really love myself. I love to read and in movies and TV. I love to experience that really slow burning, slow build up to a relationship where every time is just a little, every time you see that person, it's just one more step forward, and you've got so much further to go, but you're slowly moving towards that. I really love reading those kinds of stories, and so yeah, I really wanted to write that kind of story that would start off really resistant at the start, and slowly get closer, and all these feelings would be stirring in Jackson, and so we'd have to fight that internal hurricane that's happening inside of him, and at the same time sharing a room with this other kid who's falling in love with him. I really love that slow burning thing, because you can have a lot of fun with it, I find, as a writer as well. Just to sort of, I guess, misdirect the reader into thinking something's going to happen before it does, and it's just a lot of fun. And like I said, I love reading those kinds of stories where the relationship builds really slowly, because I just love those kinds of stories. So that was my goal. But yeah, I think through that resistance, I was able to build a whole world around Jackson as well, where he was going straight into a love story.
So I believe the chemistry between those two are so strong. But to make it even more palpable, Thomas writes and Jackson draws, and you decided to give them both these characteristics, and they start to get to know each other and talk more and get closer, talking about a comic that Thomas is working on about an Aboriginal superhero. So I want to know if you have actual plans to write this comic, or if you have any interest on working with comics in general, and where do I sign up to read it first? I want to know everything.
So I've had so many people ask me if I'm doing a boyfriend, like the graphic novel from Boyfriend the Mission Ready When You Are, or if I'm doing the comic book, and it's just never crossed my mind before. It would have been a great sort of thing to release at the same time, with like a limited edition kind of thing, to have like a 10-page comic book that would go with the release of the novel. But that was
No, we want the
definitely
full
not something
thing.
I
We
thought
want
about.
the full thing.
No, yeah, I didn't. No, I had no plans, and I didn't really think about it at all until people were asking me if I was writing a comic book, or because they love the one from the story. Yeah, no, I think what I was exploring in the book with that whole element of the story is the storytelling and art is so much a key part of Aboriginal culture. And obviously growing up, I was very artsy, and yeah, it's just part of the culture. And it was also another way that the culture is healing both of them. They get to come together and work on this thing. They both come from they both had troubled childhoods and things they've tried to sort of get on as they move into their late teens. And the art and the storytelling is very much a mechanism to bring them together and to help them heal together. And at the same time, it was a really good excuse for them to start spending more time together.
Yeah, and it's just beautiful to watch them create something together. And the way you talk about it, for me, it's so, I feel so moved the way you talk about how they're both healing together, because healing is a very central topic in this book. And it just came up to my mind right now to ask you, have this book, writing this book, healed you in any way or any form or anything?
I feel like it definitely has. Yeah, like I said, I struggled a lot with my sexuality when I was a teenager. Uh, I grew up in a small country town. No, there were no out gay people or queer people in the community that I could look up to. Um, it wasn't like in my early 20s is the times when I came out, and it's also the time that I started really understanding the importance of Aboriginal culture for Aboriginal people, and the healing aspect that you can experience. So I guess in a way, writing has always been very therapeutic for me anyway. I've always loved writing since I was a little kid, and I definitely feel writing a young novel about this gay Aboriginal teenager who's going through exactly what I really tried to articulate exactly how I felt when I was a teenager, through Jackson's thoughts and feelings. And I definitely look at it as a way that even subconsciously I was kind of subconsciously healing myself by writing the story. And I wrote the story after I'd come out and gone through that that part of my life. And I was living comfortably and happily at the time I started writing it. And so I feel like writing the book and spending like months and years on this teenage character who's Aboriginal and gay, and coming to terms with who he is and accepting who he is and falling in love for the first time. It was sort of a way to put a bit of closure on that journey of my own. But yeah, it wasn't something I really thought about until after I'd finished it and after it had a contract and it was getting published. And but yeah, I guess subconsciously it was a way of processing all those feelings I had when I was a teenager and trying to send it back in time to teenage Gary to make him feel a little bit better. But yeah, I definitely feel like it has been that kind of healing process for me.
That's beautiful. So just a quick reminder to everyone who's watching us right now, we'll be switching to audience questions in a few minutes. So if you have your questions, please type in the comment section. But before we go to the audience questions, I have a quick silly question for you because you all know you're a huge Kylie Minogue fan. So I just have to ask you to pick two Kylie songs. One you can relate to Jackson and another one for Thomas.
Yeah, I think for Jackson, I would use the song from her album Aphrodite, "Get Out of My Way." I feel like that's very much where we leave Jackson at the end of the story. He's just kind of, he's at a point where he's just kind of wanting to burst out, and he's acknowledging that he's in love and that he's changed and he's ready to be himself, kind of. So for Jackson, I would say "Get Out of My Way." For Thomas,
Great choice.
I would use a song from her album "Kiss Me Once," called "If Only." I can't really remember the lyrics, but the feeling of that song is very much about just wanting to fall in love and just wanting to be happy. I feel like that's very much in the story. Maybe not full, but he just wants to be happy. He just wants to be himself. So yeah, I'd recommend for Jackson, "Get Out of My Way," and Thomas, "If Only."
That's great to everyone who's watching us add on their playlist while reading the book. So I believe Shane will be handling the audience questions. Hi, Shane. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you. I'm so glad you asked that last question, Vitor, because that was also on my list to ask. I'm a huge Kylie Minogue fan. Yeah.
Oh, well, we could just talk about that for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. So we don't have any questions from the audience yet. A couple of comments. David said he's watching from Cincinnati and listened to The Boy from the Mish on CD. So that was, and said that he loved it, or they loved it. So, and have pre-ordered your book, Vitor, in paperback, which comes out in November, I think, here.
Alongside with my next book.
Yes.
Here the Whole Time is coming out in paperback, and This Is Our Place is coming out in hardback.
Wonderful. So I have a couple of questions on my own that I'm super curious about. The first, I'm curious, since we are very much all over the world right now, I'm wondering what the state of queer literature is where you are and how it's changed kind of as you have gotten into the publishing industry. So, like my experience, I did have access to a small selection of queer literature when I was growing up and needing that literature. Now we actually have we have a lot more access, and we're getting voices like both of yours from all over the world, which are providing us with greater access to these amazing experiences where we can find out about what people all over the world are experiencing. So I'm wondering if you are getting that same where you are.
Yeah, I think growing up for me, I didn't have access to any queer stories at all. There wasn't really none of the books we were sort of given or directed towards or directed to read, or I don't think there was a queer section in the school library even. I just didn't have access to those stories, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I saw that there were these queer stories out there. That being said, most of the queer stories I come across were centered around, very much the white Australian characters. There wasn't very much. Well, still, I don't think there's very much diversity in terms of race and culture, or voices in the queer literature scene, particularly the young adult scene in Australia. That there's not many in the young adult world here in Australia in terms of queer stories. I'm pretty sure my book is one of the only ones at the moment in the Australian young adult literature scene that features an Aboriginal character that's also gay. So it is very rare at the moment. I'm definitely seeing more diversity these days. I think the Own Voices push has helped a lot. I'm seeing a lot more stories about trans characters written by trans authors that are being published. And I definitely feel like the diversity is improving, but so far is that it's very, very niche to be diverse in these kinds of stories here in Australia.
Was that a question for the both of us?
Yeah, I would love to hear your response.
Oh, nice. So here in Brazil, growing up here, when I was a teen, most of our fiction literature were a lot of translated books from the US and the UK. So we get what mostly was like bestsellers or this kind of stuff to read. So if there wasn't any queer book in the best-selling lists, it wasn't getting here in Brazil. So it was very, very hard growing up to find queer YA literature here in Brazil. And when I wrote my first book, Here the Whole Time, Quinze Dias, here in Brazil, it was like 5 years ago when it got published, and things changed so much and so fast in the last 5 years, because right now it's so more easy to find queer books written by Brazilian authors, and that makes me so happy because we're having such a variety of voices. And I know it's just the beginning, because of course we have so many more voices to be more stories to get told, but it's so looking back, it's so many more stories we have now than compared to what we had like 5 years ago. So I'm really proud of the way the journey we had so far, and also I'm really hopeful for the future.
Same. I love that you both brought up diversity in publishing, because that is incredibly important. Like having access to own voices, having access to original voices, and supporting underrepresented communities. It's great to see yourself represented on the page. So I'm certain that this leads into my next question. I'm certain that there are readers out there that have really connected with these characters. And since the books both have been out in your countries where you actually are accessing audiences from these communities, I'm wondering if you have had any really beautiful experiences talking to some people that have read the book and have gotten a lot out of it.
Yeah, there was a little window of 4 or 5 months between COVID lockdowns where I was able to go out and meet readers and do the festivals and all that stuff. I think my favorite was, there were two. So I was doing a school's session for the Sydney Writers Festival. So I'm in like an auditorium with a bunch of high school kids, like up to 100 high school kids, 200 high school kids. And I'm in conversation with another queer author named Jeremy Lachlan, who's sort of moderating the whole day. Anyway, we're having a conversation, and comes time for audience questions, and there's a young boy from probably like 15, 16, he stands up and before he asks his question, he thanks us for writing queer stories for teenagers, and yeah, it was just one of those moments that really linger in my heart. Another time I did a book club. It was a queer teen book club. So it was just me and like 10 queer teenagers who had read the book and wanted to ask questions about it. It was amazing for me because when I left high school in like 2013, the world was just so different in terms of queer acceptance, and they were just so comfortable and confident with who they were, and it was just amazing to see these teenagers could be openly gay or openly bisexual or openly queer and proud, and have a conversation with a stranger about it. But yeah, the biggest thing I've gotten out of that was they wanted me to just write a short novella showing Jackson, Thomas in love. No drama, nothing bad happening, just showing them being in love. They'd go on to, but that's the feedback I'm getting from readers, is that they just want more happy queer stories. I think I remember there was a whole conversation I had in the event last year about the coming out stories. Coming out stories, readers want different stories, not just focusing on the coming out experience. But at the same time, like in terms of diversity, there hasn't been many queer stories from an Aboriginal perspective about coming out, or from other minorities or marginalized communities. So the coming out story is very, very important, and it shouldn't just be. I don't think it should just be dismissed now that we're at a different point in acceptance in the world. But yeah, that's the takeaway I've gotten, is that those queer teens are ready for the happy stories now, and they don't want to focus so much on the negatives and the trauma. But I do think that stuff is still important to explore, though. And yeah, I think most of the feedback I've gotten has been surprisingly from older gay men who've read the book. From like people men in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who've reached out to say that they love the story and they related to it, and they wish they had it when they were younger. I guess the feedback's coming from very surprising places, and I'm just glad that the book has been able to reach as many people as it has.
I believe it's the same for me, because having my book out for 5 years, I had received feedback from so many different kind of people, because here the whole time it's a queer love story, but it touches very hard on the subject of fat phobia and self-love and self-acceptance. And I believe body insecurities is a thing that so many people can relate for so many different reasons. And readers came up to me with so many beautiful and heartbreaking and swooning stories about how they can relate to Felipe and all his journey and process to accept his body and to feel deserving of love, and to feel like it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to feel vulnerable, and to feel that you are not in that point of your life where you can love yourself alone, and you need help. You need other people to tell you that you're beautiful, that you're valid, because we have a lot of stories about fat protagonists that's always on the turns around in the "you are strong, you are enough, you can love yourself," but sometimes we don't feel strong, we don't feel that you're enough, and we need help, and this is a book about this. So the feedback from the readers came from all of different kind of readers. So teenagers and gay men and gay women and adults and young people and older people and parents of teens. So it's been a wild journey, and I really love it. And I just want to point out that, just like Gary said, going to school events are the best. I really love it because when I go to school events, I feel like a legit rock star. I feel so good about myself because when I was getting ready for my first school event, I was so terrified because growing up being a gay fat kid in a small town, school was such a terrible place for me, and it could evoke so many bad and hurtful memories. So I was kind of terrified in my first school visit. And when I get there and saw all those this generation teens, and they're so free to talk about whatever they want, and they're so confident, and they're so kind to each other, and it was really transformative to me. And I believe that was the best feedback I could ever receive, is going to a school and seeing other teens just interacting and talking about my book and talking about queer books in general, and just having a safe place to talk about those kind of stories.
Yeah. So David says, I heard the audio CD and male elder was supportive of Jackson's being different. In my youth, Dad asserted to me, all cultures condemn same-sex love. What is the belief or attitude in your experience in your cultures?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been asked that before, and it's really hard to kind of answer because the like I can only really speak from my own experience, and my experience has been that the Aboriginal communities, well, I mean, my Aboriginal community has been very accepting. Uh, I haven't had any, yeah, I haven't experienced any negative reaction from an Aboriginal person for the story yet, thankfully.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's really good.
yeah. So yeah, my experience is that the Aboriginal community is very accepting of you know, all sexualities or you know, identifications. Yeah, I can't. So in Australia, you know, there was something like 200 different language groups. So you know, hundreds of different tribes, and they all, you know, depending on where you are in Australia, they'll all practice culture very differently. So I can only really speak for that one little part of Australia that I'm from. When I say that the culture is very accepting, and because yeah, that's been my experience. Yeah, I think in the last, you know, 10 or so years, there have been a lot of, I guess, gay Aboriginal people on TV and you know, in movies that have really sort of broken down working to break down that stigma, or you know, that taboo. And yeah, I definitely take a lot of positive out of that. But yeah, from my own experience, I can say those have been very positive. Yeah, no negativity yet.
I believe we have very similar answers to that, because I can say about the whole country, because Brazil is a huge country, and depending on where you are in Brazil, you will be perceived different and you'll be received different. So, but mostly Brazil is a very Christian and fundamentalist country, so it can be tough, it can be hard. Sometimes we hear sad stories about censorship in schools, and it still happen, and it's still awful. So it's hard in a lot of states and a lot of cities here in Brazil. But overall, I believe we are living in a kind of bright moment I don't know. I'm feeling very positive this year because it's election year here in Brazil. So I have to remain positive because it's all I have. So, but I believe we're in a better way than we were like 4 years ago. So, just being helpful doesn't hurt. So let's hope for the best.
Absolutely. I think that hope is what we need to hold on to. So I wish I could say that we were experiencing a similar moment, but in the US, but there are really incredible, terrible things happening in schools in the US right now that I did not expect to see such kind of falling back into.
At this point, right?
Yeah. So, like, I thought that similar to your experiences, that seeing like so many kids be accepted in their high schools and in their communities and not having to fear coming out like I did, like, and similar, I had thankfully a very good experience coming out, but it was not the same for a lot of my um, LGBT brothers and sisters and trans brothers and sisters. Like, they are still experiencing a lot of fear and othering from their family. And so, yeah, it's always important to think about how we can collectively move forward and how we need to not forget the past as well, because the past is important so that we remember what it was like to live in fear and how we can not return to that point in time. So, I think I've gotten to all of the questions from the audience, but I want to thank you both so much for writing these incredible books, for continuing. Gary, do you have another book that you are? Is it already out in Australia and we just don't know about it here in the US?
No, I do have another book coming. I don't really know how to explain it yet. I'm still in the revision stage. It doesn't even have a title yet. It's just gonna work a title. It's very much about youth. A kid going through the youth justice system here in Australia, and the out of home care. That whole. It's just sort of an exploration of that system and reconnecting with family and figuring out who you are and yeah, it's that kind of story. I don't really know how to explain what like the story yet. It's like this, like reading When You Are. I didn't really know how to explain it until I was preparing for the first interview for the Australian version, when I actually had to write down how I would explain it. So I'll get there eventually. It's another young adult novel, and at the same time, I'm working on a middle grade fantasy. This little cast of Aboriginal protagonists going on an adventure. So yeah, I'm still working on stuff. Nothing's out yet that you missed out on it.
All right. Well, I want to remind the audience watching, first off, thank you so much for watching today. And if you're watching this as a rerun in the future, thank you for enjoying this incredible conversation. Vitor, Gary, it was really fantastic to be able to hear two beautiful perspectives and hear about these incredible books, which are, reminder, available for sale at Left Bank Books. Signed copies of Ready When You Are by Gary Lonesborough, and we also have Here the Whole Time by Vitor Martins on the shelf right next to them. Gary was so kind to send book plates all the way from Australia, so we are so happy to have those on as offering to our audience today. And again, I just want to thank you both for being here, for doing this event with us, and for writing about these experiences.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Gary. It was great. Thank you for inviting me. It was super fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Vitor, for a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, we are going to log off. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Bye.